Good afternoon, everybody. Can you can't hear me at the back, obviously. You've all gone quiet, so thank you for that. And welcome to this PSS event. I just want to say a little bit about the structure of today, because it's a little bit different from the sort of events we've held at this particular time previously. I'm just going to say very few words as introduction, really, and then I'm going to hand over to Rachael Brealey, the Director of Faculty Operations for Faculty of Science and Engineering, who's going to give you an overview of the last 12 months or so. Then, in a just-in-time way, because I can't see him in the room at the moment, Steve Dauncey, the Director of Finance, will be giving you a view of the challenges that we face sort of looking forward and the way in which the institution is actually financed. And then I'll hand over to Matt Atkin, the Director of Planning, who will share with you how the university is going to be going through its strategic planning process in refreshing, changing, amending, creating a new strategy looking out towards 2030 and beyond. And we'll be asking you to participate in that process as well. Around about 1 o'clock we'll break, and lunch will be provided in the refectory area in Simon. I'm sure that you know where that is, even if I'm not quite entirely sure where that is. But importantly, there'll be an opportunity for you to follow up with questions to members of the PSS leadership team. We'll do some of that in the session here. So the last 15 minutes or so of the session, that's why the chairs are out. Some colleagues will join us, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of them. But we'll also then withdraw to the lunch. You can follow up with questions, and Matt will be asking you to offer some feedback in terms of the strategic planning process as well. And I think there'll be flip charts and things out there at that point. So with that introduction, and still recognising Steve Dauncey is not quite in the audience yet, but I'm sure he will be, I'm going to hand over to Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. So to anyone who was at the recent PSS conference who may already have seen this presentation when Vicky Goddard did it, that was the warm-up act. This is now the real thing. The review of the year, I guess in doing a review of the year, it would be not the right thing without starting by saying thank you to everyone in the room and to all your colleagues for all your efforts over the year. Watching graduation over the last week, and all the very happy families celebrating with their students, it's very clear the amount of good work that we do across the organisation year on year. So how are things working across the university? Obviously the reputation for excellence and our ambition to be in the top 25 universities is a key part of our vision, our strategy. League tables are always slightly questionable in terms of some of the things that they measure, but this gives a picture of where we sit nationally and internationally. You can see there's some movement there up and down, but generally in the right direction. That should be a graph. What isn't working? Ah, there you go. Technology. So you can see the trend generally is an upward trend. Our reputational impact in terms of research in student experience is generally improving year on year. The scale of the university and the amount that's going on can at times mean that the fluctuations in those league tables can impact on us, but overall I think the direction of travel clearly is very strong there. But we are, of course, working in a changing environment, and over the last few years, probably higher education has seen or is starting to see more change in that external environment than we've seen perhaps over the last couple of decades. So the Office for Students and the move to greater regulation away from HEFCE, which was a funding council and a more friendly kind of environment, to much more a regulatory environment is something quite different for us as a sector, and we're still really looking at how that might impact how we operate. UKVI and the ongoing discussion about Tier 4 students, the immigration debate, Brexit and so on, has prompted, means that we are under increasing pressure over the way in which we deal with international students. We had an audit in late autumn this year, which was an awful lot of work for the people involved in that. We came out very well from that audit, but clearly the amount of regulation and check on universities is likely to continue to rise. GDPR has just changed the way that we deal with data protection. Most of you will have been involved in that in terms of your response in both electronic and paper information that we keep. But again, another layer of regulation and some change for us to deal with in terms of how we ensure that we're compliant. And compliance is a big element now, I think, within the university sector. Also this year there was a gender pay gap report still showing that there is a lack of equality across genders for pay within the sector. And also we see in terms of equality and diversity still a real imbalance in terms of the kind of staff and students that we encourage to work within the university. It's improving, but it's a challenge, and those are things that we need to continue to work on. The government has raised big issues around value for money. Those aren't going to go away, and there'll be an election before too long. Fees and the value for money that the sector offers, I'm certain, will be fairly high on those agendas. So we have got a number of challenges to work through over the coming years. However, in 2017-18, we've had some really positive things within the university. So we funded presidential fellowships. We had a very high number of applications, very good quality applications, and we've made around 50 appointments across the university in new academic presidential fellowships. Investing in Success scheme has been run again, it was run a couple of years ago. The range of applications that came in was enormous. I was on the judging panel for those. And we've awarded around, I think, 800 different schemes for people who have bid for a variety of different things, including travel and research environments, and then within the PSS looking at some people going out to look at best practice in the sector, all sorts of interesting things happening there. We've run a number of leadership and management programs. The Investing in Leadership program clearly was a key part of that, but we have invested significantly in helping our staff to develop themselves around leadership and management. For the first time we held a London conversion day, so to try and meet students from London and the South East around conversion of student recruitment conversion, so quite a different way of us going to the students in order to talk to them about why they might come to Manchester and continue their studies with us. 10 years of the internship programme. The graduate interns are an amazing workforce for us. I think a lot of the teams represented here will have had at some stage graduate interns working with them. A high proportion of those graduates do then come and work within the university, and we've seen some real success stories from that graduate internship, which is great. For the runners out there, 2,300 colleagues joined the Purple Wave. That's quite amazing to see the footage of. And around £23,000 was raised from that, £15,000 of that into our undergraduate scholarship schemes. So great to see that people have an opportunity to come together for those kind of more social events as well. And, oops, sorry. Finally, campus master plan. So for anyone walking around campus, you'll clearly see Royce and McD going up really, really quickly now. We've done improvements in other areas of the campus as well, but those big capital programs are really, really coming on now. So in terms of looking forward, Student Lifecycle project is a major investment project for us, both in terms of the IT infrastructure from Campus Solutions, but also to look at our processes, our ways of working, ensure that we've got a degree of consistency, that the quality of experience that we're offering to our students is as high as possible, and that we're responding in terms of that expectation from students of a high quality digital
Through
environment.
SLP, we're investing in new strategic technology platforms that will meet the expectations of today's students and enable staff to work more productively. These will form an important part of the future strategic technology platforms for the whole university, benefiting future IT-enabled transformation projects.
The SLP will make things better for students and simpler for staff by introducing improved processes and procedures across the student journey, supported by new strategic technology platforms. The improvements will give us the capability to deliver a better student experience, improve the staff experience, and operate more effectively. So far, over 500 colleagues from across the university have collaborated to identify around 4,000 processes that support the student journey. Through a series of interactive workshops, they were challenged, in an ideal world, starting with a blank piece of paper, what would be the best way to deliver these processes.
The output of these workshops was a number of standardised and simplified processes which cover the student journey from initial inquiry through to graduation. They will be supported and enabled by the new technology platforms which are currently undergoing development through a partnership between IT services colleagues and our third-party partners Accenture.
We're now entering the ways of working phase of the project, led by myself and the directors of Faculty Operations, Vicky Goddard for Humanities, Joe Clegg from BMH and Rachael Brealey from FSC. During this stage, colleagues from across the university will be involved in identifying how we should deliver our new and improved processes, and will look closely at how our new technology platforms will allow us to operate more effectively.
The changes delivered by SLP, combined with the new My Manchester and the analytics initiatives, will create a foundation upon which the university can continue to deliver transformational improvements to the student and staff experience over the years to come. It would not be possible for us to build this strategic foundation without the continued contribution from PSS experts across our schools and faculties, the DSE and IT services.
We know that at times the SLP has been demanding, both for colleagues contributing to the project and for those backfilling. So we'd like to let you know just how much this is appreciated and how very proud we are that the solutions delivered by the SLP will have been designed by our university for our university.
But an outline of SLP, hopefully through the audio, you can kind of gather the messages from there. So significant investment, not just in the IT infrastructure, but in looking at processes, how we do things, and really shaping how we want to move forward as a university. Significant investment from many teams across the university, alongside keeping business as usual working. So again, a big thank you for everyone who's been involved in engaging with that project. Ways of working is continuing through the summer and into the early autumn, when we'll start to talk about what the new structures and processes will look like, and clearly then there'll be further engagement with staff over moving that forward for implementation in September 2019. Ooh. That hasn't worked. Sorry. This one isn't really working. We get to the video. So the final video is about the Making a Difference Awards for social responsibility, and Julian Skirm is in the video, which I'm hoping will work a bit better than the other one.
This year in Social Responsibility, we've challenged 5,000 students on the topic of sustainability, attracted 2,000 neighbours onto our campus, had 18,000 conversations about science and engineering, reached 15,000 HE professionals around the world, and inspired 27,000 people with a poem about social responsibility. Why have we done this? Well, we wanted to communicate our distinctiveness in having social responsibility as a core goal through engaging formats and using our greatest assets, our people. Firstly, during Student Welcome Week on campus, thousands of first-year students took part in what's been described as the world's largest classroom, where they were challenged to address some of the biggest sustainability issues facing our planet as part of our Ethical Grand Challenges programme, a core component of Stellify. Secondly, we wanted to engage members of the public and their families with our researchers, our students and other staff so that they could find out how the work of the university impacts on their everyday lives. We did this in two ways. We opened our doors to our local community through organising a community festival on campus in June, and we also went out to one of Europe's busiest shopping centres, the Trafford Centre, to engage thousands of people with the wonder of science and engineering through our Science X event. Thirdly, we want people working in higher education around the world to know about our distinctive approach to social responsibility. We therefore partnered with the Times Higher Education to include a special impact summary focusing on some of our key signature programmes. This was received by 15,000 people not only in the UK but around the world. And finally, through the art of poetry and the reach of social media, we communicated the breadth and depth of our social responsibility work through a specially commissioned poem by our inspirational Chancellor, Lem Sisay. These initiatives have involved colleagues across the PSS working in new ways and across a range of traditional boundaries.
But again, hopefully from the audio you've been able to pick up the key messages there. A busy year in terms of various initiatives for social responsibility. I think particularly the Sustainability Challenge in Welcome Week was really, really well received by students, and again an awful lot of staff engaged with that in terms of facilitating those sessions. So some really different things for our students to be involved in that give us a sense of some individuality for Manchester of that student experience. So that's everything from me. I'll hand over to Steve Dauncey, Director of Finance.
Thank you, Rachel, and apologies for the video not working. While Steve gets mic'd up, he is here, so just in time. So he's going to give you a sense of the challenges that we've got from a financial perspective. Matt will then talk about the strategic planning process and the fresh and new strategy coming forward. And then we'll have a Q&A session at that point, and I'll make a decision later whether we try and show another video at that stage. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Will. Apologies, well, especially to Will, if I was giving you palpitations for being late. And I think Karen and I were tied up in something. I think Karen's, whether she's arrived yet. I'm going to look at some of the financial realities very simply, and then look to the year ahead. And just some simple messages, really. Yeah, financial sustainability, our underlying goals, is best measured by actually delivering an operating surplus of around 5 to 7% of our income. And our trend, and that trend is looking at 16, 17, 17, 18, and then 18, 19. It's not looking too healthy. So 16, 17 at 6.3% was a good operating surplus. If you go back future years or previous years, actually it was around 4, 5%. You know, so actually achieving what is sustainable of a 5 to 7% operating surplus has been a challenge to us, and in the future it looks extremely challenging. A lot of that, simple maths is our income now is fixed at 9,250. So, but our cost base will continue to increase with pay rises, pension risks, etc., etc. Why do we need an operating surplus? We need an operating surplus because this discounts all the capital involvements to reinvest in the future, to reinvest in some speculative people investments, to invest in such as MECD or future capital programs for student experience, or actually the facilities to our goals in terms of, well, Norman Collier springs to mind. So this is a challenge for us. Well, I'm surprised that sometimes
there's a whole group of people, whilst I know who Norman Collier is, there's a whole group of people in that audience who have not got a clue who Norman Collier is.
Okay, is that better? I should try it without, really. I'm sure I could reach the back of the room. So this is challenging. What is interesting, that we've taken the budget, which contains that 2.1% operating surplus, to the board in July last week. They understood the challenges we face, but they weren't happy with projections of that going along at that sort of level for 5 years. This is not a financially sustainable position. So we've been challenged on the 5-year plan to come back with not a new shape, but actually the actions we're going to take to turn around our performance. So it's quite a difficult message, but we have got not just ideas, we have got actions we can take. The other side on this, as you look at the uncertainty going forward on the post-education review, is that our track teaching, so the transparent reporting, transparent approach through costing effectively. I can never understand what track, every time I put track up I can never understand remember what it means. But the teaching side, so for the schemes which were sponsored by the old HEFKI as was, are actually costing us 9.3k and we get 9.25k on. So that's a fully absorbed costing. So again, fully absorbed costing takes into account the investment you need to, the surplus you need to make. So that again indicates if that was 9.25, we would say that's sustainable. But that again says it's not sustainable because it's costing us more to deliver on a sustainable basis than we get in. That's a challenge. The other challenge on working in a research-intensive university such as the University of Manchester is that we pride ourselves on our quality of our research, the breadth of our research, and the research-led teaching. Unfortunately, research is an expensive issue. The government looks at it, and then when it brought in all its way it funded it, it looked at it from a value for money for government, and therefore it doesn't pay 100% of our economic costs. It will only give us 80% of our overheads, so our recovery rate there is around about 71% of our costs of inputs. That's great value for all our funders, it's not great value when you look at it for us. So I think the cross-subsidy issue is a sector-wide challenge. I'm not, no breaching any confidentialities here, that all the research that HEPI have done, etc., point to the fact that it is international students that allow us to cross-subsidise research. So there's a challenge, that's just a fact. That's the same for all our competitors in this higher education market. So talking to the board, hopefully there's nothing new here on the work streams that we're still focusing on across that 5-year plan, is international income. We assume international income which allows us to do our research, allows us to work in a, I would say, a relatively high cost environment, given some of the heritage estate we have, etc., is maintain our growth at 6%. Maintaining our growth at fee income and international fees at 6%, we've been achieving that through price, we need to achieve it through numbers. And actually we need to diversify our courses so we don't focus on those where it's super saturated but open up new courses to international students, and we need to diversify our markets, which is challenging. Focus on research recovery. I've just used the figure that we recover about 70, I think it's about 74% recovery of our research. We should be up to above 80, even under the funding models we have now. So there's a challenge there. We're improving our position, and it's around pricing and it's around costing, it's actually getting the cost models right. One of the challenges for us is to realise that as a world-leading university, people come here to have world-leading research, not cheap research. And that drive to, well, I need to have an income stream. No, you've got to have the right income stream to actually be able to afford to work here and deliver that on a sustainable basis. Online blended teaching is another strategic intent for us to diversify our portfolio, to actually give the opportunity for students who can't come to this country of having a University of Manchester education. We can do that through distance learning, but it's actually more than distance learning, because the skills and experience we get out delivering distance learning will actually add to the digital experience on campus, hence online blended teaching. As a finance director, and I'll make no bones about this, distance learning is a very attractive market for us. It's a growing market, and I see that as having a bottom line contribution to us. Obviously, from a teaching and learning experience, they might see it differently. but it is about giving an opportunity for others to actually have a University of Manchester education. Efficiency, that's there all the time. I think across PSS, Will has a target of delivering 15 million extra contribution through efficiency measures, which include standard simplification and standardisation, etc., across by 2021, I think. That's a challenge which I will be revisiting with Patrick when he joins in September, and takes over in October. But it's something that the board are challenges on. Can we go further? Can we go quicker? I don't think it's necessarily about quicker, but can we go deeper over a different time frame? And philanthropy. So we challenge, we have great philanthropic results, but actually some of that I want to hit the bottom line. So fund things we're always intending to do as opposed to funding new activities. Philanthropists, by their very nature, want to say, well, what can we do that's new? Well, actually, some of it is what can you do to help us achieve financial sustainability by delivering what we need to deliver now, what we plan to do. So that's a slightly different emphasis. Part of that for Kate and the DDAR team is actually to engage early with faculties and saying, right, what are you planning to do over the next 3 to 5 years, so we can pitch that. Harsh word for philanthropists, but you do pitch to philanthropists. So actually getting that there. I've adjusted the target there because I was way over optimistic there. I accept that. So that's a challenge, because the original challenge was to be able to contribute 50 million extra by 2021 from existing activities by pulling these levers. I've adjusted the philanthropic target. I haven't adjusted the 50 million target, hence some of the difficult discussions, how do we make up that gap? These are fun discussions. So that's the financial reality. Financial sustainability in higher education for a research-intensive university is tough. We still have, so this is the 2020 vision still. Obviously Matt's going to be talking later about looking beyond 2020, but actually getting to 2020 and our level of ambition there is but a stepping stone on where we want to get to for 2030 and beyond. So a world-leading university, research, learning and teaching, student experience, and social responsibility, things we've already heard about, things we're passionate about, things we report regularly through the stocktake report. I'm not going to go through the stocktake report. 14 KPIs behind that. We're achieving some, we're amber on others, and actually some of them were probably red on, but that doesn't mean you don't continually strive towards that level of ambition. So it's not we take off our foot off the gas, it's actually how do we just progress to maybe turn a red into an amber, a near miss as opposed to a miss. That then, from that level at the university's goals, we start to cascade down to our objectives within PSS. So you're looking there, well, enhance our financial sustainability is an underpinning of all our abilities. If we're not financially sustainable, we won't achieve our ambitions. Engagement, transformation initiatives, which I'm going to come on to, and Rachel's already touched on with student life cycle, etc. So that goes down to our operational objectives, which are these 10. And I'm not going to read out all these 10, you can read them yourselves. Across our annual, one of the things that I think, again, we've achieved over the last 12 months is to start to streamline down our operational priorities. So across PSS, I don't know what the number was last year, but we now have 10. There were more before. These are the things which the PSS leadership will be held to account in the APR process, that the board are going to sign on to hold us to account against, that the General Assembly will hold us to account against. So it's a simpler list of things, and each of the faculties equally have got 10, and I think the library and cultural institutions have 10. So it's a simpler measure, but that's still 50 measures across the organisation. For the first time, we've actually put in there the deliver the project, it's the last one, deliver the project portfolio. So actually businesses, you could look at some of these and say, well, aren't we always doing that, TEF and REF? Yes, we've got to do them. Those are key things for us, as you could say business as usual. We've got to look at the way we deliver them, but subject level TEF is something new to us. That's going to be challenging. And against all that, we've got to deliver these change projects. So that's probably the newest bit in there, and that'll have a subset of measures, which certainly the PSS portfolio group look at. what are these initiatives? No, not initiatives, I hate the word initiatives. What are these programs of work which we've got to deliver on to be able to contribute to our financial sustainability? Rachel's already talked about student life cycle. You know, that is about standardisation, it is about student experience, and those are the, and actually our teacher experience, our staff experience, those were the prime weight given to that in the evaluation of which way forward. But I won't make, there's financial savings in there as well. We actually have to deliver efficiency through this, and we'll be looking at that on how do we deliver that and the ways of working, which Rachel's talked about and we're looking at now. Employee life cycle, there are some quick wins in there about making life easier and making the processes simpler and standardising them. There will be a longer term programme on that. Inspiring leaders, there will be people in the room who've been on Inspiring Leaders. This is all tying into engagement, etc., and actually giving that common theme. So again, I'm not going to go through all those. What I'd like you to do, though, is you've got a post-it note and a pen in front of you. Take the pen away and take the post-it notes away. And that's how generous we are. But could you use one of those post-it notes and actually write down which of these initiatives would you like to hear more about? There are videos on these things, so there are things out there, but which one would you like to hear more about? Because we'll look at how we take that forward. I think if we, Jonathan, are we going to just, Jonathan, do you want us to leave these suggestions on the table of which one of these would you like to hear more about? All right, leave all the post-it notes we'll gain. So that's all. We'll take that away and say, right, how do we get that? Because I think maybe some master classes. We've got to look again in terms of engagement. Rachel's already talked about the vast amount of engagement that went on student life cycle. I don't know if you quoted how many people engaged with that, but it was over 400, wasn't it? Yeah, over 400 people have actually sat in workshops and engaged and actually had their input to this. Drawing some of that out, and Matt's going to talk about developing our vision, which you'll equally have opportunities to talk about. So knock those two off the list and see what else you want to talk about. But that's the first time we've had those projects in there. And we recognise and it's something we've been talking about in portfolio growth, having that level of potential change and action on new ways of working is actually a challenge to us because we're quite busy anyway. So the business as usual. How do you prioritise this? Because you've got business as usual. You'd say, well, we'll maintain business as usual. Actually, we're having a discussion now about let's challenge that assumption that we maintain business as usual. How do you define business as usual? Are there activities in there actually you could stop? Let's take a bit of a risk and stop doing that to free the resource up to take part in some of the change. Business as usual, continuous improvement. We would always say, well, actually, again, should we just stop that activity and say, no, we'll prioritise the change, the operational priorities. So this is something, it's not an easy one to say, because you could say, right, we've got to focus on those changes and we've got to deliver those essentials business as usual. That's probably the way I would say it. Focus on the change and deliver what is essential business as usual. But you've really got to be challenging on what is essential business as usual. Some of that, with finance, we'll be saying, well, we're changing things on finance automation and reports, and my service levels might go down. We need to communicate, whilst we make that change, we need to communicate that so we're not surprising anybody. But I think most people, if you put it the right way, was, well, if you're going to be better and it's a 6-week pause or a 2-month pause, well, that's an investment, something they'll put up with. So it's that level of engagement and communication with, in my terms, my customers to say, right, this is what you're going to see, but as a consequence of getting there, you're not going to see anything for 2 months or whatever. So actually, we challenge ourselves, and that we challenge some individuals in the room who pride themselves on the level of service they give to the customers day in, day out, and actually letting go of that is a challenge to us. So more engagement, more discussion, but more challenge about how we can actually make a difference. And that is my last slide. So I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to talk about future.
Hi, my name's Matt. For those of you who are too polite to Google Norman Collier during Steve's presentation, 1970s British comedian famed for his faulty microphone impression. So I thought I'd save you the trouble of doing that. We've heard about some of our successes from this year. We've heard about some of our near-term challenges and the change program that we've defined. But we can't just stop there. There are too many forces beginning to shape the sector for us to limit ourselves to looking back over our shoulder at recent achievements and looking into the 12 to 18-month future. So if we turn our attention to the horizon, what kind of ingredients do we begin to see? And this is just a selection of some of those forces that are shaping the sector. Some of them may appeal to you more than others. There are certainly gaps in this analysis, but just to give you a flavour of when we talk about the future of higher education, the potential future for the university, here are some of the things. As Will's already said, there is an opportunity for all of you to take part in a number of different ways in a conversation that will ramp up in September around the future of the university. And so this is very much a kind of fast-track immersion into that process, and there'll be an opportunity during the breakout session afterwards to share any initial views that are triggered either in conversation or through these slides. So, where should we start? Well, firstly, the sector's been in an era of growth. Since the removal of student number caps, more and more students have benefited from higher education, so in one sense we've never had it so good. When you look towards the horizon, the question becomes, is that era of growth set to continue, or are we in for some sort of correction? There is a view from the Higher Education Policy Institute, HEPI, whose papers are excellent if you can get access to them, who say actually that era of growth is absolutely set to continue. A further 300,000 students by 2030, driven in the main by widening participation. There is a counter-argument that says actually, given the national conversation that's beginning to develop around things like levels of student indebtedness and student outcomes and value for money, one could imagine that agenda creating a scenario that says actually maybe the popularity of HE as a choice begins to wane over a 10 to 20 year time frame. Who knows? But we need to be resilient in how we think about the future in terms of a number of scenarios that could be driven from those kind of factors. A second place to reasonably stop off is around competition. And for an institution that is recognised globally and has further global ambition, we should look globally for our competition. And what this slide says essentially is that it's not about competing with other universities. We're competing against countries who have national policy to drive, for example, levels of international students, whether it's into Australia, Germany, Malaysia. You can see the richness of that slide. All of these countries creating legitimate and credible alternative destinations for international students and indeed domestic students who would otherwise choose Manchester. It's not just about teaching, of course. One can look to research. So this slide says a number of things. The vertical axis is the percentage of GDP that goes into research. Korea being the most research-intensive country in the world, interestingly. You can see the growth of China there in terms of the yellow line. The issue for Manchester then becomes when investment is at that magnitude globally, and when one drills beneath into individual institutions who are investing hundreds of millions of pounds in research infrastructure, how do we navigate that and retain our global brilliance, our global excellence, our global reputation, our global relevance when it comes to the delivery of new and groundbreaking research and discovery? How do we do that? It's getting harder. People with very deep pockets are beginning to invest heavily over a number of years. There will be institutions who currently we don't see in the league tables who will be rising rapidly on the back of that investment. So we need to think about that in a 10 to 20 year time frame. Steve touched on alternative provision, distance learning being one example, and it begins to fragment into all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The point on alternative provision is it's not a 10 to 20 year issue, it's already here. The providers listed across the bottom, some of these brands you may be familiar with, some of them may be new to you, but the likes of Coursera and Udacity, who are running essentially online marketplaces for students who want to benefit from some sort of online or blended provision. 30 million students at Coursera. Yeah, that is a large-scale provider of magnitude and credibility. They're not all 3-year undergrad students. There will be modular provision, CPD, et al. But these are credible offerings that have built big customer bases, which in part underlies our ambition in DL. If this is a growing sector of the market with new and different needs, why shouldn't we have an offering in that space? The THE headline there takes that concept a little bit further. So these are marketplaces that connect universities with students. What if you take the university out of the equation? What about if you just connect the academic with the student who has a particular academic need at a point in time? So one could say that's an Uber-style HE model or an Airbnb-style HE model. And that's essentially what the so-called Wolf University is looking to create. A real-time platform where academics who have a certain degree of expertise and perhaps a particular time during the week, month where they can offer a service, connect them directly with students who want that service. Who knows whether that's going to take off, but it just gives an example of the richness of provision choices that are beginning to develop and proliferate. Some of them will win, some of them won't. Some of them will burn very brightly and fizzle away, but we need to be prepared to offer our students the broadest range of offerings such that we can attract the brilliant students that we aspire to attract. Steve touched on financial sustainability, so only to reinforce what he said, over a 10 to 20 year time frame, this is not a trivial issue. So how do our finances work broadly as a Russell Group institution, so not unique to us, but as a research-intensive institution? Well, at the bottom left there, broadly speaking, the £9,250 tuition fee offsets the cost of that teaching provision. At the top, this is the HEPI report that Steve referred to. It's a good read. What it clearly calls out is that research is subsidised across the sector. That is, the cost of delivering research at a total level is more than the income received from grants and charities and other interventions. So if those were the only two ingredients, an institution such as ourselves would make a structural loss every year. But over on the bottom right-hand side, it's international students who allow us to broadly break even, but breaking even on £1 billion revenue and £1 billion cost, it's quite a balanced equation. If you throw that into the future, you say, well, at the bottom left-hand, we know there's a national conversation around tuition fees. We've got the Augur review that is due to publish something in the autumn and probably be finalised in the late spring. We know that conversations around value for money and putting the student at the centre of the sector are beginning to unearth cross-subsidy as a line of argument and a line of questioning. And one can anticipate any number of geopolitical and competitive shifts that could interrupt international student flows or our attractiveness to international students. So it's important that we face into that reality and think about it in the context of our future vision. So the Augur review has not yet shaped the sector, but there are things that already have. So the Office for Students is the new regulator for the sector. We're one of 42 registered providers with the Office for Students. There will be more to follow, but we're in the vanguard of that. Essentially, the Office for Students is looking to put the student at the centre of the sector. The graph at the top left-hand corner effectively gives them licence to do that, because what that says is perceptions of value for money have been falling over time, with a very recent inflection point. And when that data exists as clearly as it does, it becomes quite easy for a regulator to come in and drive an agenda around choice, transparency, and competition, which is exactly what the OFS is trying to do. Where could that agenda take us on a 10 to 20 year time frame? If this regulation hardens and runs deeply across the sector, where could we end up? Well, at the top right, we've seen claims management cultures develop in other sectors, financial services being a particular example. That would be potentially quite unhelpful for the sector, but it's not inconceivable, and what it would drive us to do is be really clear on what we're offering, the terms on which we're offering, and who we're offering it to. At the bottom there is a screenshot from the advert for current account switching, which is an infrastructure that's been built at some hundreds of millions of pounds within the banking industry and isn't used by many people. But one can already see an agenda that says, well, how can we shorten recruitment timescales such that a student can make their decision far closer to day one on campus than they have to today? So how do we re-engineer some of these big structural processes and build them in the student's image? Who knows what version of that debate plays out, but it's one of the factors that we need to consider as we think about putting the student at the heart of what we do. I find this stuff fascinating on this slide. So this is about the future world of work. So what are we preparing students for? What world are we preparing colleagues, staff for researchers for? How are we working with the city, the region, and national policy on things like the skills agenda? The two headlines there are essentially saying the same thing, which is robots are after our jobs. One of them's from the New York Times in 1928, and the other one's from the Liverpool Echo this year. So this is a debate that comes around from time to time, and it's difficult to foresee which version of this debate will out. But how do we want to navigate data science, AI, et al., for the benefit of our students, our colleagues, society at large, given our civic role, locally and nationally? Is our provision giving all of us the flexibility to stare into this kind of future on a 10 to 20 year time frame, where there's no more job for life, there are multiple career changes, never mind job changes, multiple career changes during one's working life, and one's working life will be longer than it currently is. Final thoughts to leave you with. I would ask you to look at all of these considerations through this lens in particular, which is, that's all fine now, but what about us? What about our strengths, our uniqueness, our Manchesterness? And somewhere in here probably is the answer to how we will navigate, succeed and prosper. So whether that's our people, Rachel talks about the Purple Wave, whether it's about some of the structural opportunities and things like the Devo Health Initiative, which is really quite unique to us and our region, whether it's our ability to orchestrate things like the Internet of Things and the big data agenda, right from the humanities and human considerations through the data science and out to the robotics. Not many people can do that on a full interdisciplinary basis. Maybe it's the industrial strategy and our connections into that. Maybe it's our North Campus opportunity. Maybe it's about our culture and heritage and leveraging everything that's brilliant about that. Somewhere in there will be advantages that other universities globally would absolutely kill for. So we need to make sure that we're making the most of some of these fantastic opportunities. So, there are a range of big questions that we'll be formally engaging on from September onwards, start of a process which everybody is invited to take part in. These are some of those questions. We will invite you to share any initial reactions to those when we break out. So, the first one talks about purpose, why do we exist? The second one talks about that big idea. So what's the one thing that we should absolutely get behind? And building on what Steve said, there's absolutely something about what can we stop? How can we simplify? So that's a rapid tour that you'll be able to spend far more time on in the autumn. But please do engage in that process. Any questions, you'll know how to find me. I'm going to hand it to you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I'm juggling the agenda now. Can I ask PSSLT colleagues to come down to the front and to join us for the question and answer session? So I see Karen at the back, and we've had presenters at the front. So whilst they're assembling, can I ask you to think about what questions you may wish to ask? In terms of what Matt's just said, those three questions that are up in front of you, we will ask you to offer any comments on those over the lunch period. We've got sandwiches next door, but we've also got the flip charts next door as well. So please take the opportunity to offer your input. So we have got PSS colleagues with us now. Is there anyone brave enough to hold up their hand and ask the first question? Thank you. There should be a mic finding its way to you. It's coming down from the back, just towards on the right-hand side here. Anybody else wants to ask a question? If they just wave, we'll get the mic to them as well.
Hi, question for Steve. Hi, it's Richard Seeley from Humanities. You mentioned in your first slide about the levers that you have for financial sustainability. When you mentioned international students, you did say that you're focusing on numbers rather than price. Can I just confirm that's exactly what you said?
No. I may have misspoke because it's a current thing to misspeak. Our target is actually on international fee growth. So we've built into our plan and achieved to date 6% international fee growth. So targets on fee growth. That has been made up by about 5% of price growth. And I don't think that is sustainable. So, the issues that Matt's touched on, or is it sustainable? But actually, so we're looking at that and working with the deans and the international group to say, marketing, so let's actually take a bit more focus on the numbers and actually perhaps broaden it out into undergraduates and focus on undergraduates. So we're not going to continue doing the same on international fee. I think we could get an upside out there. So we'll still be looking at, target is fee growth, but I think we can actually overachieve against our targets if we focus more on the numbers rather than just the price.
So growth targeted has been in terms of overall income. Growth to date has largely been through price. We don't think that level of price increase for the future is sustainable. Therefore, if we are going to continue to grow, it needs to be in other areas, numbers-wise, than that which we currently have students in. Other questions? Thank you.
Do we already, and are we looking to introduce more degree apprenticeships where the company employs the student and pays the student fees and pays the student a living wage?
So we have some currently. We don't see that as an area of very significant growth for us. It's targeted approaches in particular areas. Rachel, if you want to say anything from an engineering perspective, but we don't see that as an area of large growth for us in the future. We think others will be operating more in that space.
So we do offer a range of apprenticeship programmes across, particularly in the Faculty of Science and Engineering. We've got a big apprenticeship programme around technical staff, although we also have some PSS apprentices in the admin side as well. Some of those apprentices do go on and do degrees as part of their apprenticeship, but they're much more under the formal sort of apprenticeship scheme than the degree apprenticeships. As Will said, it's not something that we see as a big growth area at the moment, although year on year we are looking to extend the range of apprenticeships we offer in the technical area. So initially it was very much around mechanical and workshop kind of skills. We now do chemical and biological, and BMH have also joined that apprenticeship scheme. So I think that's been a really good scheme to be involved in, but it's much more your traditional apprenticeship route with a college provider rather than degree apprenticeships at this stage.
Other questions? Thank you. On my left-hand side.
Hi, my name's Kieran. It's on now. I'm from the library and the Cultural Institute. We're joining the PSS party from September. Given the challenges, what do you want us to bring to the party?
The challenges to bring to the party? If you've got any drinks, they'd be very well appreciated. I think it's a logical thing for us to be doing from a professional support services perspective. If you look at what the library sort of focuses on, I think there are probably three elements. There is the Research Institute component, particularly John Rylands on Deansgate. There's a second area, clearly, which is providing services to staff and to students. And then there's the cultural institution component of it as well. Now, historically, we've probably put more emphasis upon the cultural institution component, and that's why it's been positioned organisationally in the way that it has. If you look at the balance of the three sets of activity in a library context, I think our view is that the majority of activity that takes place within the library is actually focused on the services component, providing services to staff and students. That doesn't minimise the importance of the other two, and indeed in the change that we're looking at going forward, we're probably going to put more emphasis on, first of all, the Research Institute element through John Rylands on Deansgate, and encouraging, Julian's not here, but I've just been with Julian Skirm, encouraging the library to work more with the museum, with Art Gallery and Jodrell Bank, who are more cohesive now as a group, offering programmes together on the cultural institution component, so that we do that. What might you bring? The library has got an absolutely excellent reputation, I think, for its customer service, and I think that's something that we can learn from. And indeed, some of you who've been at these sorts of events previously have seen Jan present in terms of some of the work that's been done there. I rather like the sort of mystery shopper type processes that you've had in the past. I think that is very focused on trying to understand what student needs are and trying to provide for those. And actually the library's been really quite innovative, I think, in some of its approaches. And I think Jan has previously shown us, just putting the camera on the heads of students that use the library services in order to be able to follow them around the place and find out what they actually do. And my favourite, to be honest, are the deck chairs that go out on the Alan Gilbert Learning Commons. I thought when that was first introduced that we'll lose all those in about the first 15 minutes, but they're still there. They were used very extensively at graduation over the last fortnight or so. So if you bring that innovation into the rest of the professional support services, we'll certainly welcome that. Thank you.
On one of Steve's slides, I think when you list the priorities the university want to do, and I was really pleased to see it says one of the priorities to improve the representation of BAMEs.
Yeah.
And I remember 6 years ago I went to the PSS conference and I see